the Institute of Politics and Public Affairs. At the front, we handed out some pieces of paper. So you may have collected those. If you have a question for the governor that you'd like to submit, write it on that piece of paper and then place it on the tables over here to my right. And the IOP students will collect it and we'll go from there. So welcome to a very special edition of our ongoing flagship series known as Pizza and Politics. It's my honor to welcome our guests today, who are Governor Spencer J Cox and President Richard with very warm round of applause. If you will indulge me for a minute, I'd like to introduce both of these distinguished gentlemen. They have very long biographies. I've tried to condense it a little bit. Yeah, okay, I'll do my best. Yeah, we know we have time constraints. So let me start with Governor Spencer J Cox. Thank you so much for being with us today. He's the 18th governor of the great state of Utah. He took office in January of 2021, and prior to becoming the governor, he served as a city councilman, a mayor, a county commissioner, a state legislator, and of course, the lieutenant governor. Governor Cox attended Snow College, Utah State University, and the Washington Lee School of Law. He then clerked for a U.S. district judge, and he practiced for a Salt Lake City law firm. He's described himself as a recovering attorney, and if you start a support group, Governor, I want to join on it. Okay. Governor Cox is a sixth-generation Utah. He was born and raised in Fairfield, and he's married to First Lady Abby Palmer Cox. They met at age 16 and have 4 children. President Richard Williams was selected as our 18th president here at Utah Tech University in 2014. Yes. Under his storied leadership, the university has seen dramatic enrollment growth to over 12,000 students. He's completed one strategic plan and began another. He's added 160 new academic programs, including our first graduate degree programs. He's added several new facilities, including the HPC, the SET building, the Campus View Suites 1 and 2, and the Greater Zion Stadium addition. President Williams holds a BS, an MS, and a PhD. And prior to his arrival at Utah Tech, he served as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at ISU, Indiana State University, and was the founding dean of their College of Nursing, Health, and Human Services. President Williams moved to Brigham City when he was 4 years old and has been immersed in the educational system all his life. He married his high school sweetheart, Kristen, in 1993, and they are the parents of 5 children. Thank you both for being here. It's truly an honor. And President Williams, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
All right. Thank you, Vince. We appreciate it. Let's give him a round of applause. Governor, it's great to have you here. Welcome to Utah Tech University.
Thanks, it's great to be back. I did Pizza and Politics as lieutenant governor many years ago, so it's good. I'm glad I get to come back this time. Thank you.
Plus, you gave a great commencement speech a few years ago that I think was very memorable for all of us. So, as you can tell, our students are excited to have you here. Just to begin, can you just tell our students a little bit about yourself, some background, how you got into politics?
Sure, yeah. So, as was mentioned, I've been doing politics for a while, but it was never my intention. My dad was the mayor of a small town where I grew up when I was a kid. If you know where Fairview is, raise your hand if you know where Fairview is. Oh, I love you. You're my people. Thank you. For those of you that don't, you may have heard of Ephraim or Manti. Those are the big cities in Sanpete County. Fairview is not those, but we're a small town on the northern end, about 1,200 people there. And after graduating from law school and working for a big law firm, I decided I needed to get back to rural Utah to raise my kids. So I went back to Fairview and ran the telecommunications company there. So used to be telephone, turned it into fiber optic internet company, and then farming on our family farm. And one day a friend of mine came up to me and he said he was on the city council. He said, "Hey, somebody just moved and we have a vacancy. It's not an election. We're going to appoint someone. We've talked about it and we want to appoint you." I was flattered. I thought, wow, I must be a big deal. And I said, why do you want to appoint me? He said, well, we can't get anybody else to do it, and you're fresh blood, you're back, so it's your turn, basically. And two, we have a serious legal issue, and we can't afford an attorney. We were hoping you would do free legal work if you were on the city council. And how do you say no to that? So that's how I got started. The mayor decided not to run again, and asked if I would run, and I did. I enjoyed it. I like trying to solve problems. That's I think what attracts me most to politics and public service. I got to serve as county commissioner after that, and then got elected to the House of Representatives. I was only there for 9 months when out of nowhere, Governor Herbert came to me. His lieutenant governor had just resigned, and he asked me if I'd be willing to serve as his lieutenant governor. And that was, I did that for 7.5 years, and I've just so thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity, mostly traveling the state. And we're doing what we call the Utah 360 tour, where we're spending a lot of time in different parts of the state. I told my staff, get me away from the capital and get me out, and here we are. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Governor. Talking about problem solving, right now there's a national discourse on the state of our politics. Some feel there's no civil discourse, there's tribalism, there's divisiveness. Are our politics broken? If so, what are the solutions to solve this problem?
Thank you. I speak about this often, and it's something I've been worried about for a long time. And as I speak with experts, I was with Jonathan Haidt from NYU, a researcher on this issue. I was with an author last night who was talking about this very thing, who has studied civilizations throughout history. And he said, we're following a pattern that is very prevalent in lots of different times and epochs of our world history, not just U.S. history, but he had looked at China, thousands of years ago. He looked at Europe, what has happened in different places. And he said, we continue to follow this pattern, and this polarization is part of this pattern. It's very dangerous. He said, as our politics get more and more extreme, and people are unwilling to work together to find common ground and find common solutions, it's really unsustainable. And so I do think that parts of our politics are certainly broken. We see, but political scientists who study this, it's very clear. They can show what has happened in Congress over the past 40 years. The last time Congress was this divided was about 1900. So again, cyclical. That's what's happening. So we're seeing this divide. What's different this time, though, I think, is social media. So we are, the scientists will tell you that do this, population science, will tell you that the studies show that we are lonelier, Americans are lonelier than they've ever been before. We have fewer true friends than we've ever had before. I believe that's because institutions that are so important in the history of our country are failing. How many of you belong to your local Rotary Club? I love you all so much. 3, okay? Rotary clubs are a great example of this. Rotary clubs have been around for generations. They were clubs that bring people together. We come together, we serve our community. They have a 4-way test that talks about, is it good for everyone involved? It's about caring less about ourselves and more about the people around us. Really great stuff. And that those were the types of things that brought us together. Senator Ben Sass talks about that Friday evening at a gym feeling. Remember, the community would all show up to the local football game, basketball game, whatever it is, playing the crosstown rival. For us at North San Cox, it was the Manti Templars. Yes, that's their real name. And we hated the Manti Templars. But we all came together. It didn't matter how rich or poor you were, or race you were. We came together. We felt that. So we're lonelier than we've ever been before, and I promise this is going somewhere. And what are we replacing that with? Social media, right? So if I don't have any real friends, at least I can hate the same people together on Facebook, right? So we're doing a lot of that hating, and it's become about others. And what I fear that to answer your question more directly, I wrote this 7 years ago, and it's more true today. Politics for too many people has become their religion. Speaking of institutions that are failing, religious institutions, fewer Americans now are attending church regularly than any time in our country's history. Church is another place that brings people together. So if we don't have those things bringing us together as a community, and politics becomes our religion, and anybody that disagrees with us is evil or a heretic. And so we have to win at all costs. And instead of being Americans first, we're Republicans first, or Democrats first, or conservatives first, or liberals first. And that's not sustainable. And so how do we fix that? That our politicians are a reflection of us. So I don't think we should expect Washington, D.C. to fix this. Certainly politicians have a role to play, and I hope any of you that are involved in politics will try to look for the best in the other side. We'll try to give grace and a measure of understanding. Try to listen first, listen to understand. I don't think we convince anybody to join our side by shaming or yelling or screaming or belittling. I think we listen and learn and try to understand, and then we can have a dialogue. But I believe that has to start with each one of us, with what we post on Facebook, what we post on Twitter, with the way we treat our neighbor who disagrees with us on this policy or this name change or whatever it is, that we're finding ways to come together as a community. And that's how we fix the politics. And so it's we the people that are going to fix that, and I hope we the people will do more of it.
So many questions I want to ask now. There's an author, Arthur Brooks, as you know, who spent some time in Utah, and he has said that we right now have a culture of contempt. And you just spoke about that with social media and the lack of civil discourse. But he's describing some of our politicians and our politics as morally evil. Is that the right approach to say that our politics is morally evil? Or is the right approach to really create a new political way of civil discourse and going back to our roots?
So I love Arthur. He's a good friend. He comes to Utah a lot, actually. In fact, he'll be here next week again. I think he's going to be doing a fellowship of sorts at the University of Utah over the next year. And so we're lucky to have him. I recommend, if you have not read, well, he has a couple of books, lots of books, but Love Your Enemies is the one that I would recommend the most. It's a fascinating book. I also love The Conservative Heart for any conservatives out there. And even if you're a liberal, I think you'll like The Conservative Heart. It's a good book. And I agree with him almost all of the time. The problem I have, again, I don't think we ever convince anyone by shaming, and telling people they're evil is not a great slogan for helping people to come to their senses. I do believe that there is evil in politics, and I do believe that there are some evil people in politics, but I believe that there are far fewer evil people in politics than most of us think. I'm going to talk about another author for just a second, another friend, a person that I really admire. His name is Brian Stevenson. Some of you probably saw the movie. I hope you read the book instead, because the book is much better. But raise your hand if you've seen the movie or read the book, Just Mercy. Okay, a few of you. I would love to see every hand go up in this room, because it's such a powerful story and something that Brian teaches. Just a little bit of background. Brian is African-American attorney, went to law school at Harvard, kind of disappointed his family by not going to a big law firm and making a whole bunch of money. Instead, he ended up going to Alabama to represent inmates on death row. So not real high paying and not a glorious position, really tough position. And talks about some of the racism in the Deep South. And he had some really rough stories, but the thing that he taught me is that to solve any of these divides, we have to get proximate. That's his term, proximate. You have to get close. So it's really hard to hate each other up close. And I have found this over and over again. People that I disagree with, or that disagree with me or hate me, if we have an opportunity to sit down and have dinner together, just to talk, what I learned is that usually we're not as far apart as we thought. We get to see each other's humanity first. And again, we get to see the good and look for the good. There is good in everyone. And I've stopped defining people as left or right, far left, far right. I don't do that very often. I don't think it's particularly helpful, in large part because our politics has gotten really weird. The far left and the far right have kind of crossed over at times. And so I don't know that that's particularly helpful, but I will say this. I've started seeing people more as builders or destroyers, builders or dividers. There are people on the far right and the far left that are builders, that want to make their community a better place, that are willing to work with others to try to find solutions. It doesn't mean you compromise your principles. It means that you use your principles in a way to help build and make the world a better place. And I think that's a better stream. Conversely, we see people in the middle, the right, the left, that are dividers and destroyers that just want to tear people down. I don't think, because I'm a Republican, and this isn't a partisan discussion, but I'm not interested in owning the libs. I'm interested in trying to convince the libs that there's a different way and a better way. And many will disagree with me, but if I can at least start having the conversation and listening to them, then I have an opportunity to show them why I believe what I believe, and they're more likely to listen and respect me. So I think that's how we fix politics. We do have to get back to a time when we were willing to see each other as Americans first and as partisans second.
So Governor, thinking about this two-party system, so do you believe it's good to have a two-party system, or just need to get back to the civil system?
Yeah, look, there are things that we can improve with our system. There's no doubt about that. I'm a political science major, and do we have any poli-sci majors out there? Don't be shy, raise your hands. Okay, a couple of you admitted. But my only point, one of the things we talk about is incentive structures. Like, as human beings, we follow incentive structures. We're rational beings. And so we make rational decisions. And the two-party system, look, every system is messed up. Like, I just got back from Israel, where they don't have a two-party system, and they haven't had a stable government in 5 years. They can't form a government because they're just all over the place. So it's not whether the two-party system is the best or not. It's the system we have, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. I do think there are some negative incentives out there for politicians, like the way we nominate candidates, the partisanship that exists there, where more extremes in both parties have a little bit more of a hold in deciding who the two candidates are going to be. When that is a way. There's no question. Studies have shown this over and over and over again, that whether you like it or don't like it, it's a real thing. A great example of this is the caucus convention system, which I've been a supporter of my entire life. But if you interview delegates, you just ask them questions, and then you interview Republicans or Democrats. Again, this is on both sides, who are voters. So they're not delegates. They're not showing up on a Tuesday night and then going to these long day conventions, right? They're very different in their politics. Now, you may say that's a good thing, you may say it's a bad thing, but it is a thing. And what it has led to is that in both parties, we get more extreme candidates on both sides. And so I don't know if there's a fix there. I just think it's important that we understand that there are differences and that leads to different outcomes. And those are the choices that we make. And then again, politicians, by and large, they're driven by those same incentives. Right? Once you get elected, if you want to get reelected, you're much more likely to listen to the extreme of your party, whatever that party is, than you are to listen to the majority of the population, because you know you're going to need that to have to get the nomination, right? So those are, I think, things that we should think about and that we should be intentional about to try to understand how we can drive this in a way that leads to good policy outcomes, but will also lead to a little more unity in our country.
We're surrounded by Gen Z here, and we talked a little bit about the extremists, and Gen Zers, they're not the first to come and take on far right or far left candidate. What advice would you give to our Generation Z about talking civilly and engaging these far right or far left extremist kind of rule of thought?
Yeah, so by the way, I have 3 kids. I have 4 kids. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave one off.
Which one's your favorite?
I have 3 kids in college, is what I meant to say. So I have 3 kids. Don't hate me. They're all SUU. No booze. I'm sorry. I only say that to think this, like, we have these conversations routinely, and it's always dangerous to. One of the things I don't like about, I'm Gen X and Gen Z, and I don't like these because we kind of tend to lump you into one category, and you're all very unique, right? But some of the traits of your generation that I think are really positive, your ability to be more inclusive, to see the world, to see people as humans first and other things second. I think that's so positive. I think we desperately need more of that. But what I would say again, I would look for builders. I think that distinction is so important. If you are on the left side of the political spectrum, get to know people on the right. They're probably not the kind of the evil caricature that they've been made out to be by the media and others. And I would say the same thing to my conservative friends on the right. To spend time with those on the left, even some very progressive people that I've gotten to know, like their heart's in the right place. It turns out we want many of the same things. We just have a very different approach to it. And I think my way's better. And I can point to some reasons why. But having those conversations, I told my own kids, sometimes they judge really quickly. Like, oh, that person's a this or that person's a that. I'm like, yeah, they don't do it in other areas, but they really do it in politics. So keep an open mind. Be willing to learn new ideas. That's why you're here. Look, I don't know if I'm into this or not, but I'm really worried about education in the country for a couple different reasons. But one of the important things about college is an opportunity to learn different ideas, even bad ideas. Okay? You're not stupid. I'm not trying to brainwash you. You're smart. And you should be able to hear an idea that is awful and that you disagree with, and then be able to articulate what's wrong with that idea. Just because a professor teaches it doesn't mean they're right. And you should be able to know that. And I believe in you a lot more than I think some of our politicians believe in you. And so don't be afraid of different ideas. Listen to them, learn from them, reject them if you disagree with them, and then or accept them and always be open to learning. Don't close that off. That's so important. The last thing I'll just say on this is don't be cynical. I'm so worried that our young people are so cynical. You're being led to believe that this is the worst time in the history of the world, that we're all going to die because of whatever the global issue is now, whether it's war or climate change. These are serious issues. I'm not saying they're not serious issues, but you think it's the worst economy ever. It's not. It's not those things. There has never been a better time in the history of the world to live in the state of Utah. Never. And those voices that are trying to convince you that everything is falling apart around you, those are not the builders, right? We can solve every single problem that we've ever faced. There are more jobs available right now than ever before in our state's history. Never been a better time to enter the economy. We have work to do. We've got to bring down the price of housing. But the cynicism, this seeing this thing, and by the way, sorry, I'm just going to keep going. Cable media is evil. Absolutely evil. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they're all evil. They are trying to brainwash you. They have psychologists that help them program this stuff to get you addicted to what Arthur Brooks calls contempt. And it is addictive. And I have seen it. I've seen it with people I love. I've seen it with family members. A person we deeply love in our family got on this train and just started thinking the world was terrible. Started fighting with family members. Started just everything was falling apart. The others are coming together. So they're ruining our lives. They're ruining everything. They're ruining it. and finally realized that he was addicted to outrage coming through cable news. It's not news. It's cable destruction. And so once he got away from that, he started seeing joy again. He started loving people again. He started seeing how much good there is in the world. Don't let anyone tell you that the world is worse today. The world is in a great place. We have stuff to fix, and we can do that together. So the best decision I ever made was 9 years ago. We turned off cable news. We haven't turned it on since. I'm 90 years sober, and I'm very proud of that.
You said a lot about these kids who are on a college campus. You gave a little bit of advice. Is there things that you wish you would have done when you were in college that you would give advice to these students that would make their opportunity a little bit better?
I had a great college experience. I loved my professors. I loved the programs I was in. I took advantage. There are so many opportunities out there. I would just look for those advantages. Too often, we're struggling to get young people to take advantage of some of these positions that we have, or some of these opportunities we have to go to other countries and learn about other cultures. Don't just get stuck in your bubble, in your room. Get out there and enjoy life. I was very fortunate to be surrounded by good people and good friends. And it's the one time I look back where, I was able to sit down with people that I disagreed with and have stimulating debates. Not the debates where we hate each other, where we yell at each other, but those kind of debates where you feel invigorated because you're being challenged and you're challenging back, and you're willing to learn. That's what these years are all about. Getting to know people who are very different than you, and there's no better place, no more unique place than right here on this campus at Utah Tech. I'm going to say Dixie for 10 years because I'm an old man. It's going to take me a while. So here at Utah Tech, we're very excited for what's happening here, and this ability for you to meet people from other places, right? I mean, there's so much diversity right here on campus, and you don't get that everywhere. And I'm so glad we get that opportunity here. So just enjoy, have fun. Life is hard enough. Enjoy this time. It's a great time to be alive and a great place to be going to school.
Now, before we open it up for questions, our students that come here, one thing that they say all the time is they get a new family. But I want to give you an opportunity. I know you just opened up a new office of families. Why is that important to the state of Utah? And can you just tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So, and I mentioned before, I'm worried about institutions failing. And across the board, research shows that all of the important institutions are failing, losing members, or at least losing faith or trust in those institutions. So I mentioned like Rotary Club service organizations. I mentioned churches. We're seeing that struggles with the media, trust in the media, and for good reason. We're seeing it in government. Of course, trust in government is at an all-time low. And but one of the institutions that I'm most worried about is the family. I believe that we have. Look, we talk about trying to get upstream of the problems, right? So if you see people at the bottom of the cliff, you can put an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff or a fence at the top of it, right? Always better off to get upstream of the problem, put that fence at the top of the cliff. And if you look at all of the problems that we face as a society, homelessness, drug addiction, of course, mental health, and always love to talk about mental health, especially in groups like this, our prison population, like all of these societal problems we have, the best place to get upstream from that is the family. When we have strong families, resilient families, we see so much less of those other things, and we know this. Again, the data is very, very clear. So I created one of the first offices, and certainly the first in our state's history. I don't know, I haven't found any other things like this, but the first office of family. And the idea behind this is making sure. By the way, we're seeing birth rates drop significantly here in the state of Utah. We've always led the nation when it comes to internal growth and birth rates. We're now fourth in birth rates, and we're below replacement rate. So replacement rate is 2.1 births per female. We're now down below 1.9. And that's, that's happening across the United States, by the way. Marriage rates are declining. And sometimes government makes it worse. The federal government's really bad for this. They'll have marriage penalties. So, for example, a single mom was getting some financial aid, but if she gets married, she'll lose that. And so we have this incentive like, don't get married, right? And that doesn't make sense to me. We want to make sure we're not doing any of that in the state of Utah, and we want to make sure we have policies that support families, that uplift families, that help families through the difficult times. Because if we can do that, we'll save billions of dollars of taxpayer money in prison cells and drug treatment and all of these other things. But we'll also have happier people and better people. So Utah has been known as the state for families, and I think we should be intentional about that. And I think we should make sure that government is out of the way when it comes to families, where it should be in the way, but also helping families do what they do best. And so that's why we created this new office.
Thank you. I have a number of questions.
Okay, let's go.
A few minutes. Well, we're in southern Utah, so the first question is, tell us a little bit about our future plans for our water prices and drought.
Yeah, so look, water is a big deal everywhere in the state of Utah. This is the question I get asked most. I used to always get asked in southern Utah. For the first time ever, I get asked in northern Utah as well. It's usually like this: are we all going to die because the Great Salt Lake dries up? That's the question I keep getting. I appreciate Dave Clark here, who's here with us, representing the water district, and we probably have others here. Water is foundational for our survival. You obviously can't live without drinking. You also cannot produce food without water. So I want to give a shout out to our ag community here, our farmers, because that is absolutely important. The second thing that is important is we have to be able to grow as a state. If we can't build houses, we can't have people live here, then I will tell you right now what will happen. The only people that will end up living in St. George are billionaires from California. That's what will happen if we can't continue to build them. So we have to be able to do those things, okay? And so we have to work together to conserve water. We have to use less. There's no question across the board. We all have to use less. Second of all, we have to find and deliver new water resources. I've been very clear that and I know this is controversial, but I'm on the record, I support the Lake Powell pipeline, okay? Now, what I can also tell you is that over the past few years, and we're in a 20-year drought right now, that the Colorado River is drying up. Lake Powell does not have much water. By the way, I wish we would have never called it the Lake Powell pipeline, because that's not really true. We're never meant to take water from Lake Powell. It's the Flaming Gorge pipeline. This is water that belongs to the state of Utah, that is stored in Flaming Gorge, that would be transported down through the river system to Lake Powell and put into a pipeline to come here. But what we know is that right now, the Colorado River is under duress, and that every state is going to have to figure out how to deal with less. Now, I believe that weather is cyclical, climate is changing. I do not know, and no one can tell me. There's not an expert on the planet who can tell me whether this is a 20-year drought or a 50-year drought or a 100-year drought. No one can tell me. All I know is we have to deal with what we have right now. And right now, our reservoir storage is very low. The Great Salt Lake is drying up, and there is not enough water in the Colorado River or in Lake Powell for what we want to do here. That is what is true today. Now, the last time the Great Salt Lake was this low, it's never been this low. Let me back up. In 1964, we hit a record low. Okay, it was about 1 foot above where it is today. So not much difference. We're talking a foot, maybe a little more than a foot in 1964. We have some people who are a little senior here. Does anybody remember the Great Drought of 1964, where people were worried about the Great Salt Lake drying up? Has anybody read about it? You haven't, because it didn't exist. No one wrote about it. We went back and looked. There were no news articles about the Great Salt Lake drying up, even though it was just a little bit higher than it is today. What happened 20 years later? We were installing pumps because the Great Salt Lake was flooding everything. I hope 20 years from now that the Colorado River is overflowing. I hope that 20 years from now that Lake Powell is as high as it's ever been, and that could happen. Scientists tell me that is possible. We don't know. And so what we have to deal with is the reality of right now. And right now, we are going to do everything possible because St. George is not an island on its own. You are part of the state of Utah, even if you feel like you're a couple hundred miles away from Salt Lake City, okay? We care about you, and this is not a St. George problem, this is a Utah problem. And we are committed to working with you to solve that Utah problem.
The next question is to share your feelings a little bit about our election. Some allude that there might be election fraud, some say there's not. What are your thoughts about our elections in the state of Utah?
Sure. So look, I am an expert in elections. For 7.5 years, I ran elections. People don't understand what run elections mean. Okay, the state does not run elections. Every election, presidential election, state election, local election, is a county election. We have 29 counties here. We have 29 county clerks that run the elections. The job of the lieutenant governor's office is to oversee that, to help them, make sure they're doing things right. If there are issues, we get them resources to solve. We don't investigate them. We have no power to investigate them. The Attorney General's office does that. But our job is to do everything possible to help them do their jobs right. So that's what I did for 7.5 years. Met with election officials across the country. I can't speak to every state and every election official in the country, but there are a couple things that I can say. One is that I know our elections are secure because I've worked with every one of those county clerks. I've been through their offices, and I hope you will take time to do that. If you are worried about our elections, every county clerk in the state has an open invitation for you to come in, sit down, watch the machines, look at the machines, see how they all work. They will walk you through every step. Look at how they verify signature. Look at what happens when a signature doesn't match. They will walk you through everything. I really appreciate yesterday, Senator Mike Lee put out an op-ed saying that that he believes that our elections are secure in the state. And I really appreciated him doing that and having input to what we know. So what I can also tell you is that there were over 60 lawsuits nationally challenging election integrity across the country. And what I can tell you that every single one of those was dismissed, many of them by judges that were appointed by Republicans, including President Trump. So look, it's so important that we have secure elections. I have no problem with people being concerned about the security of our election. That's a good thing. We should always be secure about that. And something you probably don't know is that every single year, since I was lieutenant governor, every single year, we passed legislation to make our elections more secure, including last year. So what we do is after every election, we sit down, we talk to all 29 county clerks, we get feedback from everyone who participated, and we say, what can we improve? So one of the things we can improve last year is we realized we didn't have security around drop boxes, okay? So what do? Now we have security cameras on every single drop box where people can leave their ballot from the state. That's a great thing. Like, we should all celebrate that. That doesn't mean you're an election denier because you think there are ways to make it more secure. So that's where, again, builders, like let's talk about it. Let's be rational about it, and let's find new ways and better ways to do what we already do very well. And that's what we're trying to do.
Governor, you speak a lot about a successful Utah, and this person's asking the question, what does that look like in the next 3 to 4 years? How do we know we're successful?
You know, we have lots of ways to measure what we do. So a couple of things that are always important. We look at unemployment. Unemployment's really important. We have unemployment rate at 2%, second lowest in the nation. By the way, I used to think it would be so cool if we could have the lowest unemployment in our state's history. We hit it. We hit 1.9%. And then I realized it's not as cool as I thought it would be. Because now we've got thousands of jobs that are open and we can't. Full employment is usually considered around 3%. We're 2%. So that's one way we measure success, is how are we doing? And we know whatever happens in the country. We're in a recession. How long that recession continues, is it a gentle recession, is it a deep recession? I don't know that. But making sure that we have jobs available before kids graduate college is really important to me. So I look at that unemployment rate. I look at GDP growth and job growth. So kind of the other side of that coin. By the way, as of July 1st, and I haven't looked at numbers since then, did you know there were only 15 states that have more jobs on July 1st of this year, so just a couple months ago, more jobs now than they had before the pandemic started? I think that only 15 are in positive territory. I guess it's a little. Utah. Idaho's close to. Utah and Idaho are number by a long ways, right? We're at like 6%. The next closest, Utah and Idaho are both right neck and neck. The next closest is like 3%. Florida just barely got above the positive line. So that kind of tells you where we are as a country. So that's something that I look at, but it has to be more than that. I look at, I wish we had a happiness index. There is, Wallet Hub has done some studies about happiness in the United States, and Utah came in second. It turns out that living on an island in the Pacific Ocean is, Hawaii is number one. And I guess we would all probably be a little bit happier if we were in Hawaii. But I love that Utah is such a happy place. There's so many people. And if you're not happy, if you think there's something seriously wrong, then I would encourage you to go out and go on a hike. It's a beautiful day out there. There are so many good things happening out there. And so that's one of the things I look at success. But to draw a more firm line into this, I need to see housing prices come down in the next 2 to 3 years. That's something that we are committed to. There's only so much. Yeah. Again, I want to be very clear. Most people want to live by their families, right? I want my kids to live near me. I do not want my kids to live with me. And that's where we're headed if these housing prices keep climbing. And so that's a supply side issue. We're working to get more supply out there so we can bring those prices down. But that, to me, will be success over the next 2 to 3 years. Solving our water issue, more conservation over the next 2 to 3 years. That's going to be very important to me. And then more funding for education and choice in education is really important to me as well.
Time for just 2 more questions. One was kind of related to success for people. Where does transportation fit into a successful youth?
Well, look, if you want to talk about what kind of what I would see success and the big dream I have, like if I could wave a magic wand and do something tomorrow, my biggest dream in life, and I know it's a long ways out, but I believe we get there something, would be high-speed rail from Salt Lake to St. George. Like that's so I'm going to take transportation and just broaden it a little bit. I've said many times that the quality of life is directly related. It's related to lots of things. But there's a direct correlation between infrastructure and quality of life. Right? So we are the fastest growing state in the nation, and for good reason. Most of that growth is internal. Most of that growth is us, our kids, grandkids. Again, we're a fast-growing state that way. For the last year, for the first time, we did have more people from outside Utah moving in than internal growth. That's the first time that's ever happened. And people love this state, and I always remind them, we love you, we're so glad you're here. Remember why you came, and don't try to change this into where you left. This is a pretty great place. But the infrastructure piece is so important. Density is sometimes seen as like a 4-letter word, right? And we have a lot of NIMBYism, like we want cheaper housing, just don't build any of it near me, right? That's kind of what happens. And so we've got to find this balance. The way we find this balance is infrastructure. So if we're investing in transportation and water and those things that are necessary, you can have a really high quality of life with more people. We can do that. But when we stop investing in infrastructure, that's when the quality of life goes down. That's when people get mad and say, hey, we're done. We can't do this anymore. So I want to thank the legislature. I know Representative Last is here with us. It's unfortunately his last year in service. He is the budget guy, and our legislature working together with the executive branch, we've appropriated more money for infrastructure over the past 2 years than any time, record numbers in our state's history. That's helping with transportation projects here. It's helping with water projects, sewer projects, all the things we need for high quality of life. And someday we're going to get our train back.
Last question. Now, I know the students are going to wonder why did I pick their question up. There's two factors: my eyesight and their penmanship. So I didn't.
This is somebody who needs to work on your penmanship. We're going to have you tweet in the questions next time.
This is probably the hardest question, I think. How many games will the Jazz win this year?
Well, if any of you watched Victor Wembanyama play Scoot Henderson in Vegas on Tuesday, I'm hoping 0 games because the first 2 picks in the NBA next year are going to be crazy good. I'm a huge Jazz fan. Love the team. Understand. I had an opportunity to talk with Ryan and Danny Ainge about kind of their vision of what's happening and why they decided to do what they do. I'm the weird guy. I would rather have I'd rather have a team try really hard and only win 20 games than a team not like each other and not try and win 50. And so I'm a little different than many fans. So I'm actually really excited to see some of these guys that we brought in. We have a ton of assets. We have the ability to make some big changes over the next couple of years, and I'm really excited. But I do have to say, I've actually watched some of their football games this year that have been televised. I did tune in, and I'm really excited for what you're building here, you guys. I love the sports programs in our state. I'm an Aggie, but I'm an unabashed fan of just all sports. And trying to get to as many games as I can, and so I proudly have one of your helmets displayed in my office, and I think we need an upgrade there. So
well, I'm glad you brought that up.
Sitting here, so
we have to
Can I say just a little something about the branding? By the way, I love the logo. I love it for lots of reasons. Anytime I see that at Utah in the middle, that's just classy. It's great. I love the colors. One of the things, I get asked a lot about the name change, and I just want to say this. Like, I know there's a lot of controversy about the name change, and I understand that. And I actually completely understand and feel the passion of those who were opposed to the name change. Not bad people at all. My reason for being willing to support the name change is it's not the race piece of that. I know that's gotten a lot of publicity, and I don't think that that's especially helpful. That's not why I say it. But what I will tell you that as lieutenant governor, now governor of the state, as I travel around the country, and people will tell me anytime Dixie came up, there was just this like mass confusion, like, wait a minute, is that in Georgia? Like, I would get asked that like all the time, and I realized that there was a real ceiling to what this could be, because names matter and branding matters. And so for me, I had nothing to do with that, and it certainly didn't have anything to do with trying to destroy the history and heritage of this incredible place that people built this. But now that I've seen it, and now that I've experienced it, it's awesome. And I'm now hearing from people, they're like, wait a minute, tell me about this Utah Tech. What is this? I'm having conversations I never got to have before with people just asking me about it. And I get to tell them about what's happening here, and the growth and the programs that you're adding. And there's this energy that's really amazing. So I know that doesn't satisfy people, and I totally understand that. And I don't expect you to agree with me at all. We're going through this right now, and I know I'm probably out of time in this sense. We gotta go. You're probably out of time, but I want to just quickly, can I talk about the state flag for just a second? We're going through the state flag. There's a couple things that I think are really important. A lot of people are suddenly very interested in our state flag. I've never been there. So there are two things. That flag was never meant to be our state flag. Okay? That was never the intention. We did not have a state flag. And the legislature and the governor couldn't agree on what they were going to do. And the World's Fair was coming up. And we had to have a flag. Okay? So they said, well, let's just put our seal, the state seal, on a blue background and send that in until we figure it out. And that's what they did. And then eventually was like, oh, I guess this is their state flag. They just kept it. Most of the state flags that you see are actually wrong. They're not actually our state flag. There was a couple of things missing on them. And so it never really got resolved. Here's the other thing that's important. Guess how much public input went into that state flag? Zero. No public input into that state flag. Okay, our existing state flag. However, it is part of our history now, and it matters to me. I love that flag. That flag has been flown at every important event that I have been part of in my life. So here's what I said. When they came to me and said, some legislators said, we want a new state flag. I said, okay, I'm open to it, but only if a couple of things happen. One, we're not getting rid of our current state flag. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to elevate the state flag. Let's make it a ceremonial flag so that it is used at the most sacred and important events in our state. So that at every governor's inauguration, the current state flag, our ceremonial flag, is still being flown. Let's make sure that it's flown above the Capitol on every major event. So when we have Flag Day, we make sure that with the flag of the United States of America, the ceremonial flag is being flown. Veterans Day. Let's use it still. If you're willing to do that, then I'm open to it. Now, the other thing that I told them, I said, I will veto anything that doesn't include the beehive. I know some people don't love the beehive, but I believe that the beehive is the most symbolic part of our existing flag and should be a very important part of whatever we do. Now, the cool thing about this is that, I have to ask this question. How many of you have been to Disneyland? Yeah, it's Utah, you've all been there. How do you tell if someone is from Utah when you're walking around? That is. BYU, University of Utah State, Utah Tech, right? That's how we know that. Like, the one thing that divides us as a state is how we know. It's like, oh, I know you and I like you. Oh, you're from Utah and I probably don't like you, right? That's a good thing. But like Colorado, Arizona, very unique flags. The other thing is there are about 23 other states that did the same thing we did. They couldn't figure out flags, so they just put their seal on a bed sheet, as we call it. So when you see all 50 flags hanging there, and you're like, oh yeah, I recognize those, and then you're like, I can't see Utah because there are 23 that look just like ours. So we said, if we're willing to, we'll call this the people's flag. We'll have a ceremonial flag, and then we'll have the people's flag. And the people have responded. We have over 5,000 submissions. It ended yesterday, but we had it narrowed down to 20. We had 35,000 people comment on those 20 flags. We're going back, making some changes to those, and then we'll have probably 5 or 10 more with some changes from the feedback that we've given. We'll have another opportunity to weigh in on that. Ultimately, it's up to the legislature. The legislature may decide, no, we're not going to do it. We don't like any of them. We're going to keep things just the way they are. Or they might say, if they're not going to keep the ceremonial flag, I will veto it. If the beehive's not involved, I will veto it. But if they come up with whatever else they come up with, and if it's the people's flag, we'll probably keep that. So pay attention. There's some opportunities still to participate, and keeping and preserving the very best of our state, and continuing to make our state a better place. President, thank you for letting me be. I've talked way too much, but I love these people. I love your students. I love what you're doing here. I'm so proud of the work that's happening.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thanks, everyone.